Jim Cameron, Michael Pachter obviously has a pirated copy of Avatar on his computer somewhere. Take a look at it.
I bought it.
But
I bought it in Blu-ray.
But you brought it up yourself. Listen, it's a marketplace, and it's now a fragmented marketplace. There's a market, okay, of gamers who want to buy games, and that's ever expanding, okay? And in fact, I think a lot of hardcore gamers are feeling a little bit threatened in a weird way because suddenly all of these these sort of unwashed, unclean new gamers, right, who will play games that a hardcore gamer would never be seen to be playing, right, are carrying away the majority of the business. And that's taking focus, okay, from the people who make games and who run the ecosystems that fund the making of those games away from the kinds of games they want to play. This is a battle of business models, okay? The hardware is a MacGuffin. The hardware does not matter. Like the PS4 and the Xbox 360 and their specs, it doesn't matter. This is a race to see who can build the best business model to make it profitable to make games on those platforms. And right now, the biggest advantage the consoles have over Google, over Amazon, over Apple, et cetera, is that those companies are not entirely focused on this. They will if the business continues to grow, and they're trying to be, okay? But Microsoft and Sony are laser focused on it. Can they win, you know, with that marketplace as opposed to other marketplaces? And that's really the battle here. And the content is going to exactly follow that.
It's easy to get labeled anti-console. I'm not anti-console. It's easy to get labeled. I am, and I'm also, by the way, at various times I've been called a Nintendo fanboy, a Microsoft fanboy. So I am a game fanboy. I love the game industry. I love everything about games. Up until now, if you've wanted to play a harder core game, you're either on PC or console.
Right.
I fundamentally believe that will change in the next 3 to 5 years. And a lot of the hardcore gamers that are watching this that would never stoop to playing Candy Crush or whatever it is that isn't a hardcore game will find that the Candy Crush devices are attracting them with totally hardcore, completely cool, amazing games. And things will get a lot more complicated. I'm not saying, I've never said consoles will disappear. I don't think PC will disappear. I think PC's going to go through another heyday.
Effect there too.
But there's going to be a lot of confusion that hasn't been there in the past.
Jason, when the Candy Crush player has their Candy Crush device, okay, and through, you know, the Facebook game mechanism or whatever mechanism they get advertised to, sees, you know, some kind of more mid-core or hardcore game, like, oh, this is awesome. We're building them into a consumer that's going to end up helping the hardcore and the console. So all of this stuff feeds back.
Gaming.
None of it is bad. And, you know, I have a huge collection of vintage arcade games. Okay, and so when I think about the context of all this, I always look way back to the beginning of you know, the first time that pixels were drawn on a screen that weren't Archie Bunker, right? And there was a transition between the arcade and the home console that happened that was really, really, really powerful, right? And we think about it in these rickety old terms like the Atari 2600 and the first Nintendo systems and all of that. But what that was really about was a compelling form of entertainment that you could only get at the grocery store at an arcade. Okay, you had to go somewhere, there was this big machine, you put quarters in, and it was super awesome, it was social, and it was all of those things, and it was a huge business, right? I think Asteroids in 1979 was a $4 billion business, in 1979 dollars. By the way, all in cash, okay?
You know, but the day that John Lennon was killed, I was playing Asteroids when I heard it. I was at a pizza parlor, and they told it while I was playing Asteroids. And trust me, I'm about $250 million.
But did you finish the game? But no,
of course not.
The trick here is that there's a sea change, that content then became available on a new device, okay, which was in your home. And suddenly the marketplace, which had been awesome and growing quickly, became enormous, right? And there was a total sea change. Did the people who owned that content react in a reasonable way? Not really, but they didn't know how to react in a reasonable way. Okay, the sea change that we see right now to mobile devices is very, very similar. Right, you have suddenly a really convenient way to get that content, and in fact, we've given permission to a whole group of people who never felt they had permission to be gamers before, to be gamers, and we're going to see that continuously evolve. And we're all chasing that. All of the cash that's going to be spent on development and spent on making super high quality content is going to follow where those gamers choose to play stuff. And you know, Jason was very prescient when he gave his talks about graphics not mattering a decade ago. It really doesn't matter, especially as we reach the asymptotic limit right now of hardware. Right? You know, there is a certain amount of stuff that can be drawn. The thing that's starting to matter, the thing that starts to matter is the content itself and the art and how it gets used. You know, the difference between a PlayStation 4 game and an Xbone game is going to have a lot more to do with the quality of the art staff than any hardware concern. Okay, and the way that gets presented to the consumer is going to have to do with the way the marketplace works and the way the advertising works and how healthy that ecosystem is. And that is the real thing. You know, it's like looking at World War II. The Germans had better weapons, and the Americans had better weapons. No, the Americans had a better economy. Okay, and at the end of the day, that's what mattered. And at the end of the day, whether or not the consoles can cough up an economy that can beat Apple is going to be an interesting thing to watch.
So if I'm Sony, to wrap up this section, what do I do
Is
then?
the second question you've asked? I like that.
This is great.
That means we have another 30 minutes. Okay, go ahead.
No, but this is a
So
fascinating
are you getting half paid
conversation.
today?
No, I think it's fascinating though to talk about this, because if I'm Sony then, and all these things you guys are talking about, I think everyone agrees, like, oh, that's starting to happen. What do I do? Is Sony prepared in the right way?
I'm glad you asked. I actually think that they're not. I think Sony might move away from this with Kaz as the CEO, but Sony has had this problem of living in the past,
Right.
where in the 80s we all bought a Sony TV and a Sony VCR and a Sony stereo because we weren't sure if other components would work together because we didn't get it. It was all new.
Right.
And they lost that edge. Now we'll have a Samsung TV and a Denon stereo and whatever. And I think Sony still thinks they can build that brand back. So I think they're still fixated on selling you a Bravia 3D, LED smart TV.
Right.
And I think that they're so fixated on that, they're not going to adapt. They still think that the Vita has a life and is a realistic part of the gaming ecosystem. It's not. And Microsoft, I think, is not at all thinking about cross-selling other products. I think they're focused on being a more integral part of media consumption in the home, and they're going in that direction.
They've got a backup plan. They have the Surface. So if it turns out that people want to have their console be mobile, they have a Surface. It's an utter failure.
Right.
No one would hide that.
Right.
But they're putting a lot. They have untold resources to put
Sony has
behind
the Xperia, but
And
It
that
just
will-
doesn't-
That may
it
become
doesn't-
more important in their future.
But how many of us honestly think about the brand of our television when we're on our iPad? You don't feel like you have to go.
We still think about the brand of our pad, and it's interesting.
No, of course.
That that.
But it's an independent decision, is what I'm saying.
But it's all cyclical. I think that we're thinking about the brand of that tablet in the same way now that we were thinking about the brand of the television back then, right? People definitely know. You ask somebody what operating system they have on their phone, they know that. Think about that. They know what
It's crazy.
operating system they have on their phone. That's pretty awesome, right? But that's that marketplace again. And again, you can build that into something important or not.
Having worked at Sony and actually watched how Sony has been over the years, I think first of all, and we did already, but we have to give them an incredible amount of credit for this launch.
Right.
Inside the industry, quietly, hush hush, 2 years ago, Microsoft was going to win this generation, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's not the case now.
Right.
Right? They have been very, very smart, very, very adept at changing their policies to fit what gamers wanted, and they've created an incredible hardware.
Yeah.
The creator of that hardware, Mark Cerny, who I know extremely well, could not have done this with the PS3 era because Ken Kutaragi was there and the entire company had a very different way of looking at things.
Right.
I actually know better than most people the history of internal hardware production at Sony because I went through this with Mark from Crash, watching how hardware's gone. The change from the Kutaragi model to, I will call it the Cerny model,
For sure.
is far larger than anyone realizes. It is looking at the market and adapting to the market rather than creating the ultimate graphic hardware from a technical standpoint and assuming the market will come.
Right.
It is a seed change. So I would not underestimate Sony's ability to change now that they have a person in Mark Cerny and obviously the people that put Mark Cerny in that place who are willing to change. And I think we have to give them that credit. Looking at Sony's past is not useful here because it's a radically different company internally, and we see that in the success that they've had in the last year.
I think that's true. That's true of Microsoft as well. I should point out something really interesting
Absolutely.
here, which I've been thinking about a lot. One of the things that we're restoring in our game restoration efforts is actually one of Mark's first games, if not his first game, which was one of the first, if not the first, touchscreen game called Quack. So I think that the irony of like having this
Marble Madness,
no, it's way before then. It was a touchscreen game, like a tile arranging game.
He was 6 years old when he built it.
No, he was 17. There's a great video of him where he actually says, in Mark Cerny's very understated and very humble way, that this is going to change all games forever. He was saying this, and he was like 17. But it's an awesome kind of touchscreen game. It's a touchscreen game on a monitor. And so you get like static electricity on your finger. It's a very strange thing, but it's a touchscreen game. And here we are in this world where you have Mark steering the ship for Sony in ostensibly a battle against touchscreen devices to try to figure out who's going to win this contest. And I think that you always come around cyclically to the same place that you were. But Microsoft is a very different place to the way that it has been in the past as well. And I think that these companies have an internal mechanism going on and an external face that's going on, right? And within Sony, I think you're exactly right. I've seen very clearly that the impetus internally is entirely about content, entirely about games, driven by Mark in a way that Sony hasn't been able to for more than a decade to be entirely about that, and it's super impressive. And when Microsoft made missteps in their messaging and the way that they presented themselves to gamers, not the way they presented themselves certainly to the business world and to investors, but to the gamer, Sony was able to step into it because of that internal change, right? And it's reflected in the culture that Don Matrick had been running inside of Microsoft, which was very much focused on the larger picture of entertainment, very much focused on the larger picture of how Xbox as a business could fit into a larger Microsoft content model, right? Yep. And when that got expressed through his organization, it got expressed really poorly, and it didn't really connect. Now he left, now they've rejiggered everything internally, and they have a totally different kind of message coming out. And one of the things that's very, very true of the modern world, the very connected social media world, is that customers and consumers and fans are just as happy with you if you do things right as if you screw up but admit to it and change it. And Microsoft did a great job with that. And so it's an interesting horse race. And
but remember, the last time we were sitting together was at E3, and Microsoft had just dropped the ball, and Sony had just dropped the mic, and everyone was saying, it's over.
Right.
And I sat there and said, to incredible email negative response, it's not over. Microsoft can always change. And people say, absolutely, it's over, it's over, it's over. Right. And 48 hours later, Microsoft changed. So Microsoft has clearly also gotten the message.
All right, well, we're going to leave it there.
But the one important thing, the reason that they can change on a dime is
such a great
exactly
segue
what
there,
we were saying before. That the hardware doesn't matter, okay? The software policy matters, they could change that on a dime. Right. The operating system matters, they could change that on a dime. The developers and the software model they have, that can change on a dime. The billing model they have, that can change on a dime. Right. None of it's important. It's all gas. The only thing that's important is the way they conduct that business and how safe an ecosystem they make for investors to create content. That is all that matters in this generation.
All right, and we'll leave it on that note. This has been an awesome discussion. Next week we are back talking more about Microsoft and what they are doing with the Xbox One. So stick around.